Everyone, my name is Mark Gordon. I'm with the Association of Ontario Health Centres. So thank you for joining today's Legacy Client Chart Viewer Project Kickoff. Before we get started, I just want to go through some administrative items. Just to avoid some background noises, we are going to put everyone on mute. And if you have any questions, please use the chat box on the WebEx system, which should be on the right-hand side of your screen. That said, we will open up the lines towards the end of the meeting should you want to ask some questions once the presentation is complete and you don't want to type it in. We will take questions throughout the session, so we will pause to answer some questions, but we'll continue moving forward just to ensure that we go through all the information and the demonstration today within the hour. So I'm just going to put you on mute and we're going to get So in today's agenda, we're going to look at the timeline. So what we're going to do is understand what is the legacy client chart, like why are we doing this, what's our overall timeline for implementation, what does the implementation look like. So from your center, what do you need to know? We're just going to touch upon Purkinje for those centers who are still on it, as well as we'll go through the demo, and of course we'll have questions at the very end of the session. So what is the LCC, or otherwise known as Legacy Client Chart Viewer? So about 3 years ago, the AOHC negotiated with the Ministry of Health a lump sum payment for 3 years of read-only access to both Purkinje and HealthScreen. And the purpose being is, as we migrated onto Nightingale On Demand, we still needed access to the data that was housed within Purkinje. That 3 years is almost up. It actually ends in December of this year, at 2015. And then, so our goal was to take a look at it and say, well, what are we going to do? Should centers pay year-over-year licensing fees so they can access it? Or is there a better way to be able to review and print the data without having to pay a licensing fee for the next many, many years? And so the AOHC had started forward with, on the approval of the Information Management Committee, to build the Legacy Client Chart Viewer. Our strategy when doing this was really to take a look at it saying, well, how long do we have to keep the data? Well, according to legislation, we need to keep it 10 years after a child's 18th birthday. So obviously, we need to keep it for a very long time, just like your paper records. We wanted to ensure that centers didn't have to pay an annual maintenance fee. And right now, if you look at it across the sector, we're paying about $150,000 a year just so that we can access the data should we need to. We also wanted to make sure that we created a system that gave you full control of your information. So you'll be able to go into it when you need to, you can print it as you need it, as well as you can determine who has access and be able to log that information so you can keep track of who's going in for what. And finally, we just want to highlight that this is voluntary for centers to use. So while there's no cost to use it, the purpose is that if centers decided they'd like to continue to pay Purkinje or HealthScreen for read-only access, they have every ability to do so. So this is a voluntary service that we're putting forward should you choose to use it. So there's 5 things I just want to make sure you know about the LCC Viewer. We're currently going through pilot, or what you would call beta testing, and it is going well. We're getting some great feedback from the centers who are doing it. Data validation will be required. So unlike NOD, so NOD we had to do quite a bit of data validation. We had 3 mock cycles and we went in and confirmed that the data was accurate. With the LCC Viewer, you won't need to do 3 cycles of data validation. So the intensity of the validation won't be as great as it was in NOD, but your center will still need to go in and spend time validating that the information is being transferred from your legacy EMR into the LCC. Number 3, the conversion process can be lengthy. Well, what that really means is we're going to provide centers an executable file, and from a layman's term, you'll click install and then click next, 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 and then the system will run in the background. You don't need to stand by your PC and watch it happen. All you'll need to do is go in, just check once a day, just make sure that things are being copied over and things are running smoothly. And obviously contact us should there be any issues. We have 2 phases of the implementation when it comes to the type of legacy EMR. The hard one is the Purkinje implementation, and that's because there's a dollar value associated to it, and that dollar value, as we mentioned, is $150,000 a year, and our current expenses are covered up until December 2015. After that point in time, centers will have to incur read-only licensing costs should they not have migrated to the LCC. If you do migrate by that period of time, and we do believe it's very doable with a fair amount of time available, then you'll have no more incurred costs. If you go past that date, then we'll have to look at read-only access through Purkinje and what that maintenance cost will be. And we'll talk a little bit about that a little further on in the presentation. The second stage is really health screens. Health screens in a little bit of a better position because they're not paying for read-only view access. They don't have to, but they can't print their data. So we're going to really focus on the Purkinje sensors by December just to avoid the cost, and then we're going to complete the health screen sensors by April 2016. So as a number 5, the strict timelines are really dedicated towards Purkinje sensors, but we want to ensure that we get all sensors onto the LCC who choose to be on that by April 2016.
So this is Bruno Lones speaking now. I am also on from the EOHC on the LCC project, and I'm going to speak a little bit more on the implementation plan. So currently, as Mark indicated, we are completing the beta testing, which occur 2 phases as well. The first phase was the data migration part, which has been completed for all the discrete data elements, has been completed for encounter and scan document for 1 CHE, and is still ongoing for some encounters and some scan document at the 2 other centers. Then the second part of the implementation is the kickoff webinars and the technical webinar. So the kickoff webinar that we're doing today is just to give a high overview of the project. The technical webinar that will occur at the end of this week and beginning of next week is really dedicated towards the technical side of the implementation, and we will go through step by step the implementation process, which is geared towards more the IT or DMC people that will actually perform some of the tasks at the CHE. Then the LCC work plan and the executable files will be available for download starting October 1st. They will actually be available through and distributed at the technical webinar so that people can follow up with it. But for centers that cannot assist to this webinars, we will contact them and ensure that they are available by October 1st for them. Now the implementation plan will be by the center will have to download and install the migration tools, as well as start the migration process. The validation tools will be available a little bit at a later time by October 16th, and at this time the center will be able to begin validations. So now if we move to the next slide, you're going to see how it displays on the timeline. So by October 1st, we have a data migration tool available. By October 16th, all centers are expected to have completed the discrete data copy and can start the validation of the discrete data element during the time that the encounters get migrated and scan documents can migrate it. The completion of the migration is planned for mid-December, at which time CHE will be able to start migrating to the LCC viewer completely for the larger site. And yeah, and after that, this health screen implementation at the end in January, that we will speak at a later time, and we will have similar webinars before the implementation to address the specific of health screen, as each implementation is a little bit different from each source system. That's it.
Thank you. I've been on mute. I've been talking. My apologies. So I just want to say that one more thing regarding the implementation. If you have not registered for the technical webinar, please do so. It's on our website. They're on September 25th and the 28th at 1 p.m. We believe there's a plenty amount of time to do both the data migration validation of the records within your legacy EMR. But should it go into the next fiscal or you decide you need more time at your center, we are trying to look at some contingency plans. And one of them is to go back to the ministry and see if we can get just additional funding for at least one more quarter for read-only access to Purkinje. Now, we don't know if this is a really likely scenario because of the austerity budget, but we are going to push anyways to see what we can do in order to support our centers to ensure that you feel comfortable in the LCC viewer and that the data has migrated appropriately.
So now we have done the beta testing with 3 centers, and what are the results of this beta testing is that on the data migration side, we had to do some improvement of the process due to the length that it would have taken to copy the data, discrete data element itself. Also, we had to consider adding support for SQL Server 2000. To ensure that we can migrate to both. Even if 2005 is recommended, we still can migrate to 2000. And as well, we did separate, which was done first as one-step process. We had to separate it in a 2-step process where the scan documents are migrated in parallel with encounters, first to speed up the process, but also to ensure that we can focus on the migration of encounters and delay, if necessary, the migration of scan document, because the viewer tool that the end user use will be able to access the scan document directly from the Purkinje server until that they are fully migrated.
So I just want to touch upon one more thing regarding Purkinje. Purkinje, there's a bunch of centers who are still on Purkinje because they're waiting for N10, and then there's a bunch of centers who have moved on to Nightingale on Demand and have been participating in this read-only access to their database. So for those who are participating in read-only access, Purkinje is starting to contact you to say, well, we're trying to negotiate a new fee in order for you to pay for that read-only access. If you are getting phone calls, please let us know at the AOHC. The reason being is, should we have to extend, or we are capable of extending the read-only access for another quarter, we can do it at a much lower rate than they can do it at the individual centers. We are hearing, as of right now, that the price Purkinje is quoting centers is significantly higher than what the AOHC negotiated 3 years ago. And so what we want to do is make sure that we're negotiating at an enterprise level and we're getting the best price possible for organizations so that they're not being, spending more than they have to. In addition, if there are centers that want to stay on Purkinje and not use the LCC viewer, or they decide they'd rather pay the maintenance fees and stay on Purkinje, that's the organization's choice, but we will still, on your behalf, speak to Purkinje in order to keep the cost down so that they don't go to individual centers and do a markup. So please contact us at the ims@aohc.org should you get contacted by Purkinje, and we will be here to support you through that process.
Do you want to just read the questions before we...
So we'll just look at some of the questions before we go into the demo. So the first question was, will this be posted on, this webinar be posted on a website? And yes, it is. We will send out a link to all the participants after this meeting. The next one is, our center uses HealthScreen. If our agreement ends December 2015 and March 31st is the end date for deployment for HealthScreen, does this mean our centers will not have access to historical HealthScreen data for these 3 months? So the short answer to that is you will have access, and I apologize if I'm not being that clear. It's only the Purkinje centers that have the hard date of December 2015. HealthScreen will have read-only access to their system at no cost, and you do that right now. But your challenge is you can't print in HealthScreen when it's in read-only mode. And so our goal is to get you onto the LCC viewer, so not only will you be able to read, but you'll be able to print.
Muted.
The mitigation strategies are related to the project. So one of the mitigation strategies that we're doing to ensure that the system works well as planned and it's easy to use at centers is we do have some pilot centers going through it right now, and we've tested it out on, I believe it was 3 centers going through the data migration process, as well as getting them to participate in viewing the viewer and understanding how it works. And so far, our feedback has been pretty good, so we believe we're going to the right path. Our members who have tested the system out seem to be very happy with what we've created. And when you go through the demo shortly enough, you'll get a view of it as well. Obviously, the cost risk is for us to work with the ministry to help avoid those costs at the center. So what we're trying to do, as we talked about, is really avoid having any extra costs at your center by having the ministry pay for any extended read-only access, should you feel you need additional time to do the data validation. Next question is, does the conversion to the LCC slow the overall system processing? I'll pass that on to you to answer.
So I can answer on this one, and it has not been detected as such. The simple reason being that the data has to be processed by the database, which slow the throughput of the data flow between the different servers, which means that even if your network will be used, it will not be used enough significantly to have an impact on the system processing.
Thank you, Bruno. The next question is, will we be able to print a complete chart from the LCC in one step?
So at this time, it's not planned that way, where you will be able to print all the encounters in one way and the CPP information in the other way. That are certainly functionality that can be added at time in the product, depending on the feedback that we receive through the project. Because we have complete control of the tool, we also have complete control of the requirement, and that's certainly functionality that can be added. But again, it's a question of priority and what the sector wants out of the tool that the tool cannot do at that time.
And we're going to take one more question before we go to the demo, and then we'll take some more questions after the demonstration. So this last question is, would you please clarify the scan document migration process?
So the scan document migration process is to take out the documents from the external storage and put them in the same manner that the encounters are being put into the LCC viewer. To remove the dependency on external tools, as well as to add security layers that allow to audit when documents are printed and allow to ensure that documents cannot be printed without access through the tool, as well as not be able to modify or otherwise alter the document before you print it.
Thank you, Bruno. So we'll move forward onto the demonstration.
Hi everyone. So my name is Omar Wasim, and I'm working with Bruno on this LCC project. You should all be able to see my screen. So this is the dashboard, what you're looking at right now. This is the very first screen that you see when you start the project. The first information you have to enter is the database, the username and password. For multi-database CHCs, you will have a list of databases here, and you can choose which one to connect to. For a single database CHC, it will just have the one database selected. Your username.
I just want to clarify before you continue that this is a demonstration of an end user tool, and it's not the data migration tool. Huh?
Yes. So what Bruno just mentioned, you will have a data migration tool which will be responsible for migrating your data from Kickoff to the LCC or HealthScreen to the LCC. This is the viewer tool that users will use to access that data. The username and password you will enter will be the same from your legacy system. It will also import over your rights. If you look over to the left-hand side, you will see that there are buttons here which are disabled at the moment. These buttons will become enabled once you log in, and depending on the rights you have, is what you will have access to. So for example, I have an administrative account right now, so I can access all these buttons, but people who don't have administrative rights, for example, will not be able to access the admin button. If you want to look up a client in the LCC, you would click on the clients module. Likewise, to look up schedules, you click on schedules, and to look up PDGs, you click on PDGs. So I'm just going to jump into the clients module now. At the very top, you have a text box where you can enter in an indicator that you want to search for. This can be a chart number or a first name or a last name. If I just hit search, it will give me the entire client list. Or if I hit, let's say, 10, for example, it will pull up the chart number 10. This is the demo chart we're using. So I will double click on this chart and it will open up the client's profile. You can also maximize this screen if you wish to just have more space. And so everything that you see in this window is all the client's information. So anything related to the client is found here. You don't have to go anywhere else to find it. On the left-hand side, there is a menu. So at the very top, you see demographics. Below that, there's appointments, CPP, encounters, and results. This side menu can be minimized if you wish to have a full view of the screen. Within this menu, you will see this white space. Currently, it's empty, but we're going to fill this up with shortcuts to, in this case, for example, for demographics, we'll fill it up with shortcuts for telephones, addresses, identifiers. So you can just click on it, and it will scroll down to where that module is located. But the entire information for demographics is found in this one screen, right, that you're looking at. If you want to move on to the client appointments, you would click on the appointments button below here. This will show you a list of clients' appointments. You have a few filter options available. We understand that some clients can have a lot of appointments. So you can filter appointments based on schedule, based on type, and based on date. So if, for example, I want to see appointments from Linda's schedule, I just type in Linda and it will search that up. Or I can even just type in G and it will pull up George because that's the only schedule that matches that criteria. Likewise, if I want to filter based on type, I can type in F for follow-up, or I can type in R for regular visit. If I want to look at appointments prior to 2007, so within 2006, I can even change the date and 2006, and it should only show appointments prior to that date. Hitting clear filter will give you the full list back. If you do realize that these dates seem to be a really wide range, and that's just to allow all appointments in Kickoff, even if some of them might have dates which are a bit wonky, but they will still show in this list, just in case. If I click on the CPP button now, it will take me to the client CPP. On the very first screen, you see the summary. So it has a list of all the modules and a shortened view of what records those modules contain. These same modules are available at the top here. So if I want to look at a medication, let's say Percocet, and I want to look at its details, I would double click on Percocet. It will switch to the medication screen and it will show me the details available for Percocet below here. I can switch to a different medication if I want to see details for that medication. What you can also do is at the very top, you have filter options available. So if you want to see historical medications or archive medications, you can check those checkboxes and it will include those medications in the list. You can also search for a particular medication. So on this right-hand side, beside the magnifying glass, there is a search box. If I type in Percocet, for example, it will search the list. It will filter the list to only show medications that match that criteria I just entered. If you double-click on a medication, so if you recall in Purkinje, double-clicking opens the document the medication is from. The same is true for the LCC. If you double-click on a medication, it will open up the document screen, and below the document will be shown here, and it will also show you the document properties below here. So you can see the document history, the document comments, the general information related to that document. You can also maximize the screen. All screens can be maximized and minimized just so that you can make use of the full space available to you. If I move on to the remaining modules, they all function in the same manner. So they have checkboxes available to give you the complete list or just the current or active items. And this is consistent for all the CPP modules. They all have the search feature and the filter and the list. The details can be found below. Now, just actually something I should have pointed out before, you might notice some additional fields here that you have not seen in Purkinje, and that's just because of HealthScreen. So this tool is meant to accommodate both platforms, and both fields are accounted for from the two systems. We will be looking at putting in some differentiation so providers can more easily differentiate, okay, if this is a HealthScreen field only or this is a Purkinje field only. Moving on to the, and again, we will put in this empty white space you see, we'll put shortcuts to medications, allergies, just to give you some quick links. Moving on to the document section. In the document section, this is similar to the CPP modules where you have filter at the top. You can see deleted documents if you wish by clicking this button. You can also search for a particular document. So if I want to search for, let's say, CBC, it will pull up that one document which has CBC in its title. On the left-hand side, you will see the document tree. This is similar to the document tree from Purkinje. Actually, for a CHC, when your migration happens, it will migrate over the exact document tree you have in Purkinje. So if you have made customizations, those customizations will be brought over as well. You can click on a certain category in the document tree, and it will filter the list to only show documents from that document category, just like in Purkinje. So investigation documents contains hematology, microbiology, and biochemistry. And if I click on those individual categories, I can again have a more filtered list. If you double click on a document, it will open up the document window. In this particular case, because this is a test client, we don't have a document in this case, but there are other documents that I can open up. So for example, this is one document. You can also open up multiple documents. So if I want to open up two side by side, I can have both documents. The same is true for client charts, and I will show you that a bit later. Below the documents, you again have the document properties, so you can see the document history, you can see any comments, the user details of who created it, who signed on it, who updated it, things of that nature. And again, if you see extra information, it's either because that information is available in the database and we can show it, or it's part of HealthScreen. The last module in the client's profile is the results section. These results are items recorded in your Purkinje results table. Now the results table in Purkinje contains a lot of more information that it shows in the interface as part of your flow sheets, for example. So we have made that available here as well, so you can actually view the extra results, such as social demographic results, if you click on the left-hand side filter. You can also filter these results based on test names. So if I type in spoken language, for example, it will show me the result belonging to that category. And again, you can check these checkboxes and you can uncheck them if you wish to exclude or include certain results. So that's the entire client's profile that you see. One thing you can do is you can, if you wish, you can open up multiple client charts. So if I want to just show you quickly, I can open up two charts side by side if I want, and each of them will have their own window, and their information will be contained in that entire window. I just want to quickly go through the remaining sections and just make note that these are still being developed. So we do have the interface, some of the items in place, and we're working on them in the back end. Much of this functionality you will have available to you for the October release. So if you want to look at schedules, for example, you will click on the schedule section. You will have a list of your schedules available to you at the top. And you can also switch dates on which date you want to view. You can also change the view of the schedule. So I'm currently, right now I have a number in here, but most likely we'll give you a button to switch between different views as opposed to typing in a number. So a daily view looks like this, where you have the full day's view. If you can also switch to a weekly view. So if I type in 7 days, I have a weekly view available to me, or I can have a monthly view for a full month. And again, we'll make these specific buttons, so you can just click on a particular view to see that view. The PDG section works very similar to the client section, where you will type in an indicator for the PDG. You would hit search, and it will pull up a list of PDGs. Right now, I just have some dummy data in here just to test the PDG module. Again, if you double-click on the PDG section, it will open up the PDG screen. Very similar to the client screen. It has the same left-hand side menu. And the PDG's appointments and the encounters related to the PDG will be found in the same fashion they're found in a client's chart. And the PDG members is also part of the details, and the information from registration of the PDG can be found in the main screen. The last two sections, settings, are user-specific settings. So each user will be able to change their password, set their language preference. The LCC is being designed to support both English and French, so this is where you can change your preference. You can also enable exception mode, for example, if you have rights to do so. And this is to go into confidentiality charts. The glass breaking functionality will be available in the LCC. The last section is the admin section. The admin will be able to create and delete users. The admin will also be able to modify their password, for example, modify their settings. The admin, this is also where you'll have batch printing functionality, the ability to manage patient confidentiality, and the ability to view and print audit logs. This functionality is there's nothing in here at the moment, but we are working on this, and you will have much of this available to you in the October release, and the complete package in the November release that we're planning. The very last button is just a logout button, which will log you out. For the moment, it just quits the application, but we will most likely just bring you back to the login screen after the logout button is clicked. And that's everything we have.
Okay, so we'll just take a look. We have a bunch of questions that have come in, so we'll quickly go through those, and then we'll open up the lines for any other. So so the first question that we have comes from, have the pilot sites migrated PDGs, and how successful has that been?
So the beta site have migrated all the discrete data elements, which include the PDGs. Right now, the PDG module has not been completed on the viewing side of the process, which means that we cannot look at the PDGs in the interface itself, but looking at the data, there's no discrepancy between the tables. I mean, we don't do any data transformation between the two systems, so all the data is copied pretty much as is, except some references that are being updated. But and the encounter are migrated as the client encounter, so there's no reason to have a discrepancy on both. But we are developing at that time the PDG module to start the beta validation of the PDGs at the beta site.
Thank you, Bruno. The next question, is the search function enabled by chart number, name, address, other?
So the search function uses the chart number and the patient's name. So the address is not part of that. It is the first name, last name, or the chart number.
At that time, if additional functionality or self-functionality needs to be added at a later time for usage feasibility, that will be added to the requirement, and timeline will be divided on when we can release them, or if we do.
The next question, does the AOHC provide training for all our staff? So yes, we will be providing training. We're going to do webinars, we're going to have documentation, we're going to have videos and how-tos. So the short answer is yes, we'll be providing all the training your center will need in order to manage and run the LCC viewer.
Actually, prior to the October release, so near the middle of October, we'll be releasing the validation tool for validation. Before that release, or as part of that release, we'll be giving you a webinar just similar to this with details on the LCC, as well as we'll provide a user guide that will guide you through using the tool. And we'll record the webinars and put them up on SharePoint so people can view them later on as well.
Thank you. Next question. When we search my user or schedule type, can these be made as a drop-down instead? Because this is a legacy data, new staff may not even know which names to search for.
Yeah, actually it can be done. That's an improvement that is fairly simple to do, where we can actually provide a mix of text and Dropbox. So if you know the name, you can type it, and if you don't, then you can look in the Dropbox.
Also, in the client section, if you don't know the name, you can just hit search on an empty search bar, and it will just give you the full list as well.
Next question, is Hummingbird still the tool used to query this data? If not, how would we access the data now to query?
So yes, the Hummingbird requirements are a little bit different. You just need access to the database to perform your reporting from Hummingbird, and the database, and you are the owner of the database. So we don't have an issue at that time. So we do recommend to keep Hummingbird and the Pukenji database itself without the external document for the time that reporting is required to the Pukenji system.
Thank you, Bruno. In terms of staff resources, would our help screen to nod data validation be a good estimate to the staff resources and time commitment needed for health screen to the LCC migration?
So I did answer that question directly in the chat as the person was leaving, but in essence, yes. With the only exception is that for legacy system, so Pukenji or health screen to Nightingale, you did the migration 4 times, where we ask you to do the validation 4 times, where we ask you to do it only once. With that circumstance.
And just another point, just want to clarify again, I think we touched upon this earlier. There is a major difference between your nod or nod validation and the LCC validation. During nod, we had a staggered implementation where every center made customizations. So the process was also changed. You know, we had first this resin sketch, then we have multi-databases, then we had, like different modules came into play later on. So the process kept changing, whereas the LCC migration process is the exact same for all centers participating. So one center's validation can be translated directly into another center's validation. So collectively as a whole, it'll be a more comprehensive validation, whereas individually you'll just be doing one cycle.
Perfect, thank you. I think you said we would have much of the functionality available with the October 1st release. If true, what will we not have October 1st, and when will that functionality be available?
So by October...
Go ahead, Omar.
Okay, I will go ahead and you can fill in the gaps. So by the October release, we will have the schedules and the PDGs. We will also have some printing functionality, perhaps not all of it, and we also have some user management functionality, so creating and deactivating users. The remaining functionality would most likely be related to patient confidentiality and audit printing, which will come in the November release.
So also to be clear is that on the October release, the auditing of user activity will be enabled, except that you may not have at that time access to the log directly in the viewer. It may end up being in November, depending on the time that we have for development.
Muted.
Very similar to a mock cycle you did. So if you have providers who participated in the nod validation, they'll be a good candidate to also validate the LCC. They'll be familiar with the process. And similar to the nod validation, we're recommending between 20 and 40 charts that you look at, and you do a screen-to-screen comparison.
Thank you. Can you show us in the demo how a chart is printed?
Not at the moment. So the printing functionality is still being worked on at the moment. So unfortunately, I can't show providers right now. but we will be able to show you in the October release. We'll be doing a full demo, a full training webinar just for the tool and how to use it. And in that release, we'll be able to go through with that.
Thank you. So we're just going to unmute the lines right now and just ask if there are any other questions people may have regarding the presentation or the demonstration that we've had today. Does anyone have any questions? The phone lines are open. Okay, so if there are no more questions, I want to thank everyone for attending today's webinar. We will be posting a copy of this one or the previous webinar we did yesterday online, and we'll disseminate it to everyone who has attended. And we look forward to hearing any feedback you may have. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to contact us at our ims@aohc.org email address, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. Thank you for your time and enjoy your afternoon.
Thanks, guys.